Welcome to Portfolio Africa, a show where we present deal makers, creators from the private and public sectors that are working to transform Africa for the better. I am Kemi Oshukoya, your host. According to industry analysts, Africa is considered the last energy frontier as well as the new global hub for oil and gas production and exploration company, with 7.5% and 7.1% of global oil and gas reserves respectively, and recent discovery in Senegal, among other countries on the continent, plus an expanding local consumer market. Opportunities abound and there is no shortage of suitors investors queuing in line for opportunity across the continent. But with potential opportunity also come potential challenges, which is part of the territory of working in developing countries. While these challenges might dissuade some companies and investors, others see it as an opportunity to help countries develop their energy infrastructures as well as other resources that will provide adequate revenue for the population in the country. BP, the British multinational company and one of the world's top 7 oil and gas company, has been operating across Africa for more than half a century and has invested more than 30 billion in Egypt's energy sector alone. The company also has investment in Angola as well as partnership with local partner Cosmo Energy in Mauritania. In 2017, the company announced a major gas discovery offshore Senegal. I caught up for a conversation with BP Head of International Affairs, Robert Scher, in DC recently at an event organized by Meridian International Center. We talk about projects that the company is working on across Africa, and you share insights, lessons that other companies, investors could use as guide for entering and staying in the Africa markets. Talk to me a bit about what you're doing in Africa. You mentioned you are working with Senegal, and your colleague also mentioned that you guys are working in Egypt. So if you can give an overview of
Sure.
the project that you're working on in Africa.
Sure. We in BP work in many countries in Africa throughout the continent, and in many cases have been there for decades. I think some of our longest relationships have been in, as Mary Street said, in Egypt and then in Angola, where we've been present for a long time. We have consistent projects in Algeria where we've been. We also are looking to expand and improve our relationship with a lot of countries, not just in the upstream, where we have a new project, the field off of Mauritania and Senegal, a natural gas field, but also we have downstream pieces as well. We have a presence in South Africa and many other countries. So we think Africa is a very important continent for us to make sure to engage with, be a part of, and in some cases we've been a part of it for decades.
Why is Africa important for you to engage with?
Well, first of all, obviously, from an energy company, we have to look where the resources are, and we now can use new technologies that we have at our disposal to look at areas that we may have looked at before and see new opportunities. And I think to some extent that was part of what we're seeing off the coast of West Africa, and that led in some parts to Mauritania and Senegal and developments looking around elsewhere. Also, it's an important market for us. It's an important place for us to be. It's one of the critical developing sets of nations, continent around the world, and we really do feel like it is our it's what we do is bringing light, heat, and mobility to the world. And Africa is a place where it's going to be important to continue that so that the African countries can continue their economic development and take care of their people.
Okay, are you working in the renewable energy sector in Africa?
We work in renewables and in wind and a lot of other places, wind, solar, a lot of other renewables and charging. We don't have a large presence right now in those in Africa, but we are always looking for opportunities where they exist and where the countries are looking for that. We have to see and be able to respond to what the countries are looking for.
I asked the question because you talk about working regarding the climate change, and African countries, Africa as a whole, is being impacted a lot by the climate change. So, and a lot of governments are looking into renewable energy, especially since everyone is moving away from energy that impacts people in general.
Well, I think what is fascinating to look at and how we have to make sure that we as an energy company in conjunction with countries around the world help in this transition. First of all, one of the most important ways to help with lowering carbon emissions is to use better fuels. So I think we have been talking with a lot of countries, and we certainly talk broadly, but if you look at natural gas as opposed to some of the other ways that power is generated throughout Africa, that's a huge change in overall emissions. So we have to think about this, we would argue, as how do we get to lower emissions more quickly and be agnostic about the fuel that gets you there for the time being. Now, it won't be natural gas forever, but as Mary Street said, the bridge from higher carbon fuels to renewables, we think natural gas is a natural partner. So that's part of that process. We also have invested in Lightsource BP, is now the company where we work with a very large and established solar panel company to install major applications and installations around the world. So that's something that we're looking to through that venture that we have to see where there are opportunities. And clearly in Africa there are going to be those opportunities. But I think we have to look at all of this simultaneously and not one versus the other if our goal really is to lower emissions in the most quick manner that we can.
Okay. I guess my other question to you is what lessons have you learned working with African nations worldwide? Because I asked that question, especially American investors, and there are American companies that are still very skeptical about investing in Africa. But you are familiar with the country, and there are a lot of opportunity, but there's also a lot of challenges. So, what lessons have you learned, and that you can share with American companies that are looking or they're still skeptical about Africa?
Well, I'll tell you, I go to events around Washington where there are countries that we're involved in and there are other companies that are not involved yet. And I consider it part of my job, in fact, to speak on behalf of the countries, of the ease of doing business, of the openness of these countries, to, I think, some American businesses who are not, I wouldn't try to say skeptical, but I'd say uninformed. And to tell them that every country that we operate in has its complexities and has its challenges, but that's not Africa, that's everywhere. There are complexities and challenges in every country that you're trying to operate in. The key is to understand them and to be able to work through with them, because the people in these countries want you to be there. They want that development. They want what comes with U.S. companies' foreign direct investment. You just need to figure out and work with people. And as soon as you realize that, it becomes easy. Is everything easy? Of course not. But it's no different in Africa than anywhere around the world. Make sure you understand who you're dealing with. Get an appreciation of the issues that are facing the country, and you will be able to do work in almost any country around the world.
Okay. I guess the other thing is, let's talk about women. women empowerment in Africa, gender equality, not just in Africa, all over the world. And as a global company, what do you think about women empowerment, especially in Africa? And what is your contribution to that? If
So
you can
we
talk about that.
Absolutely. We look at our corporate social responsibility around the world and take it very seriously. We understand that our license to operate in any country around the world requires that we are providing support to the community and working with that community. If we don't have the support of the people in the areas in which we work, we won't be successful. And we know that. That's in the United States, that's in Africa, that's in any country around the world. As we look at that, we generally try to focus on a couple of key themes: education, health, and empowerment, and economic development. And those are all the pieces that we look at. Now, there's no boilerplate for each country. Every time we go into a country, we have to look at what are the needs and requirements and tailor our corporate outreach and our looking at the value chain. All of that needs to be tailored to the countries themselves. But I can assure you, I have seen the programs that we have for countries around the world, and I would say in well over half, if not almost all, we have a specific piece about female and gender empowerment because we understand that all these countries are only going to fully achieve all they can if all the population is a part of that.
So are you working with governments on those issues to ensure that women are involved, women and girls are involved to help push the gender equality forward?
So it really depends. Then we're getting into specifics of each one of the countries, which I just, I don't know. And I think, we try to make sure that what we do is the most effective way we can do it. If it's with governments, if it's with local NGOs, if it's just with the people that we're working with, we're going to make sure that those pieces are put in place so that we can all see the benefits of the projects we're involved in.
Okay, one last question, and that's regarding corruption and taxation. African countries are working, are putting in place anti-corruption, and recently at the World Bank, last week, the G24 Community Board were talking about making sure companies, especially multinational companies like yours, pay their taxes instead of So what do you think about that, especially because there are companies that tax avoidance in one country and they pay it in another country, and because of that, those countries where they're not paying taxes, especially in developing countries, are missing out and their economic are affected. So what is your view about that? And now, do you guys pay your taxes?
Yes, we pay our taxes. We don't want to operate in a system that isn't straightforward, clear, and run by the rule of law. Nobody benefits in that. Not us, not anybody else, not the people. We absolutely live by not only the letter, but the spirit of the anti-corruption acts that exist both in the United States and in Europe and in the UK, and we will always continue to.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
There you have it. You just heard from one of the companies from the private sectors that are working in Africa, sharing their experience of working on the continent. The latest edition of the World Bank Index Ease of Doing Business that was published in October showed that governments in Africa are making improvements by undertaking reforms, big business reforms that will remove or reduce red tape regulations and other burdensome rules that often discourage investors from investing in the African economics. The goal is to foster sustainable economic growth across the continent. Togo, Nigeria, Rwanda, Mauritius, Morocco, Kenya, Namibia, Tunisia, South Africa, Zambia, Malawi, Botswana are some of the countries on the continent that have improved their business environment. It's the first step in opening their doors to investors, and it's worth checking out. Thank you for joining us.